Some works of art were never meant to be admired. Some canvases capture more than brushstrokes. They hold pieces of the damned. Tonight's tale is about a woman who brought beauty into her home, only to discover that what watched her from within the frame was alive. This is The Painting That Watches. Clara Ellison had always considered herself a connoisseur of the strange. She wasn't rich, not exactly, but she had a talent for finding forgotten treasures at estate sales and antique shops. Her apartment was a museum of oddities, clocks that didn't tick, dolls with glassy stares, and books with pages yellowed by centuries. But her latest find would eclipse them all. At a Victorian estate auction, she wandered into the back of a dusty room where fewer people bid. That's where she saw it, a painting nearly 6 feet tall, framed in carved oak. The portrait showed a young woman in a black Victorian gown, pale hands folded delicately in her lap. Behind her stretched a lush garden, roses in bloom, ivy crawling up stone walls. The subject's eyes were a deep gray, painted with such skill that they almost shimmered. Clara whispered to herself, "It's perfect." No one else bid. It was too large, too unsettling. So for a fraction of its worth, Clara brought it home. The first night she hung it on her living room wall. It dominated the space, its presence commanding every glance. As Clara sat on her couch, wine glass in hand, she swore those painted gray eyes were following her. She laughed at herself, shaking off the unease. But when she woke at 3 a.m., parched and stumbling into the living room for water, she froze. The painting's eyes were not looking ahead anymore. They were looking down at her. By morning, Clara convinced herself it was a trick of the shadows, the way street light spilled into the room. But something else was different. The garden background, the roses and ivy she admired the night before, seemed less vivid. The roses looked wilted, the stone walls darker, and behind the woman's chair, Clara thought she saw the faint outline of her own sofa. Days passed. Each morning the background changed. Slowly, subtly, the roses withered completely, the ivy crumbled. A faint, ghostly reflection of Clara's living room began to replace the Victorian garden. She couldn't explain it, but she couldn't stop watching. One night, Clara invited her friend Mara over, desperate for reassurance. "Tell me I'm losing my mind," Clara whispered, gesturing toward the portrait. Mara tilted her head, squinting. "It's creepy, I'll give you that." But then Mara leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Clara, did the woman just blink?" They screamed, both stumbling backward. When they looked again, the woman's eyes were frozen, blank as before. Mara left within minutes, refusing to stay another second in the apartment. Clara was alone again. From that night forward, the changes accelerated. Every morning, the portrait's background showed more of Clara's living room, the curtains, the lamp, the reflection of her coffee table, and the painted woman's chair was no longer the same Victorian wood. It had become Clara's armchair. The woman's lips curved ever so slightly into a smile. Clara barely slept. She covered the painting with a blanket, only to wake and find the fabric crumpled on the floor, the gray eyes staring directly at her bed. She tried to move it, to haul the frame into the hallway, but the moment her fingers touched the wood, the canvas felt warm. Like skin, she recoiled in horror. One evening, as thunder shook the city, Clara sat trembling in the dark. The painting was nearly complete now. The Victorian garden was gone. The entire background showed her living room in terrifying detail, as though painted from inside the canvas itself. But worse, the woman was no longer sitting in her chair. She was standing, her hands pressed against the inside of the frame, fingers long and pale, painted nails scraping at the edges. Clara dropped her wine glass, heart pounding. She whispered to herself, "It's not real. It's not real." But then the woman's mouth opened, her painted lips moved, and in a voice that wasn't painted at all, a voice that echoed through the apartment, she whispered, "Move over. I need space." The lights flickered, the frame rattled, and Clara screamed as she felt hands, cold, impossibly cold, grip her shoulders from behind. She turned, but there was no one there. When her eyes snapped back to the painting, her heart stopped. She wasn't looking at the Victorian woman anymore. She was looking at herself. Painted Clara sat in the armchair, her face twisted in silent terror, hands pressed against the inside of the canvas. And standing over her was the woman in black, smiling wider than before. Neighbors reported screams that night, but when police entered the apartment, they found nothing unusual. Just an empty living room, a wine glass shattered on the floor, and a massive portrait hanging on the wall. The painting now showed two figures, a Victorian woman standing proudly, smiling, and behind her a second woman, painted, trapped, her eyes wide with horror, forever frozen in silent screams. Clara Ellison was never seen again. Some treasures are not meant to be owned. Some art does not depict the past, but devours the present. So if you ever bring home a painting that seems too lifelike, too knowing, ask yourself, are you admiring it, or is it admiring you? This has been The Painting That Watches, another dark tale from the whispering shadows. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, please subscribe DarkWhisper AI. Leave a comment. The next episode will be up soon, don't miss. Goodbye.